My name is Anamari Fanthorpe, and I'll be your host today. And today we have Kathryn McGarvey here from the Meaningful Marketing Company. And we're going to get into the ultimate marketing hacks, listening to your customers. Going to be lots of great insights happening today in the session. So please feel free to get your questions answered throughout. Just as a reminder, if you're following us on our social media platforms, you can drop questions into the chat and I'll pull them through. And if you're watching this on Zoom, you'll get the recording later. It'll be up on the website so you can watch it again at any time. So welcome. Kathryn, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you so much, Anamari. Good morning, everybody. Welcome along to what I've called the ultimate marketing hack, because I genuinely believe it's the ultimate marketing hack, listening to your customers. So my objective for this presentation today is to make it easier for you to make marketing decisions that are going to make a genuine difference in your business. Today, we'll cover off why I think you should interview your customers or clients, how it can transform your marketing, how to interview your customers. And I know in the write-up I said 7 questions, but I couldn't whittle them down. So I've got 10 essential questions for you to ask. And there'll be time for a Q&A at the end. But as Anamari said, please feel free to put your questions in as we go. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Kathryn McGarvey. I'm a marketer based in Ahuriri, Napier, and I'm a customer discovery specialist and a marketing strategist. I've got 20 years marketing experience, including for the kind of big corporates that you don't mention you work for at a party without expecting a whole lot of complaints about your service, through to small local businesses. In that, I think it's 23 years now that I've been a marketer, and in that 23 years, I have learned that making assumptions and guessing doesn't always work when it comes to marketing. Now, that always is a late addition to the slide this morning, because I thought chances are somebody's going to have an example of a hunch that really paid off. But for the most part, making assumptions and guessing doesn't always work. And I want to give a little example of why that is. Now, some of you might have seen that before, so if you could keep stum till the end to not spoil it for everybody else, that would be great. I want you to imagine a couple of men aged in their 70s, both born in the winter of 1948. In fact, they were born 100 miles from each other and just 3 weeks apart. Both grew up in the UK. Both have been married twice. Owner of multiple homes, including in different countries around the world, and it's a given with multiple homes that they're wealthy. They're both pretty famous. They both are known to dress up for their work and often seen in lots of bling. Now, if you look at that list and you've got a product or service to sell, you might imagine that these guys have an awful lot in common. Look at what they've got in common. That one message, one way of marketing to them might work, except for this last final detail, that they have also both been referred to as a prince in part. And I am, of course, talking about Ozzy Osbourne, Prince of Darkness, and the King, who was the Prince of Wales. Both those men meet those criteria that we can see there on the left-hand side. But as you can imagine, these are very, very different people. You're going to market to them differently. They're each going to have completely different needs and motivations for what they do. So guessing and making assumptions based on some demographic facts doesn't always lead to the most reliable results. What does lead to the most reliable results is getting inside the heads of your customers. If you can get inside their heads and be part of the conversations that are going on in their heads, you're going to reap the rewards. So why should you interview your customers? Well, you get a really deep understanding of their needs and preferences. You can identify their pain points and the challenges they face. And if you've done any kind of business planning, any reading up on how to grow your business, any consultations with coaches or consultants, they'll all be asking you, what problem do you solve, or what are your customers' pain points? And most of us take a punt at that, but don't necessarily know for sure. So if you can find out for sure by talking to them, that's going to set you apart. Another reason to interview your customers is to learn how and why they're buying from you. And once you've got answers to all those questions, you're able to make much more robust marketing decisions because they're grounded in facts, not in guesswork. You can also get your customers to write your marketing messages for you, and we'll talk about that a little bit further on in the presentation. Something that I haven't put on the slide, but I did just want to talk to is why I like to do interviews rather than rely on surveys or running focus groups. I like interviews because you're one-on-one and you can go really deep and explore what's actually happening with people. With a survey, I don't know, maybe it's just me, I suspect not, but I'm not always 100% truthful when I complete a survey. If I'm asked, how much sleep do I get? How much exercise do I do? How much do I drink in a week? I may not always give an answer that's reflective of my behaviour. Like many of you, maybe I might give answers based on the person that I want to be rather than the person that I am. So whilst surveys are great for getting some broad data and some indications, they're not great at getting factual information that goes deep. My beef with focus groups is that in the past, as a corporate marketer, I have sat behind those one-sided mirrors watching focus groups go on, and it's really hard not to get groupthink, not to have one person with a loud voice either drown out the quieter voices who have an equal number of interesting things to say, or they lead the conversation and people start to agree with them rather than disagree. So I really like interviews because you get to talk to people directly and get their insights without anybody else's influence coming through. In addition to that, talking to your customers means that you may uncover hidden opportunities for a new product or a service improvement. You can enhance customer satisfaction and loyalty. If you're either paying somebody like me or taking the time to ring somebody up and ask them, please, can you tell us how we're doing and how you found them, because we really put our customers at the heart of our business and we want to hear from you, then that's a really good way to enhance customer satisfaction and loyalty. And the other thing is you never know what you might learn. When I run customer interviews for my clients, I warn them up front, I will make the first phone call and then I will call you immediately afterwards in a state of overexcitement at the things that I've learned from just one call. There's so much to learn, and it's really interesting talking to people. As well as being interesting, it's a pure fact. This company, Profit Well, which is based in the States, has done some research. Admittedly, these are with larger companies, so the numbers are a little bit bigger than for small businesses. But they found that companies that interview 10 or more customers a month grow 2 to 3 times faster than companies that don't. And 7 out of 10 organizations don't talk to more than 10 customers a month. Depending on the size of your business, 10 customers might be a lot, but if you can do 2 or 3 or 4, one a week, customer interview on a regular basis, you will reap the rewards. So the kind of things that you can learn from a customer interview is the number one reason your best customers buy from you. And you might be surprised that it's not what you think. In fact, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was doing a customer interview exercise with a client, and I sat my clients down before I started the interviews and asked them to list what are the top 3 reasons you think people hire you. And it was great because they went bang, bang, bang. They could answer straight away. Sometimes when I ask that question, people don't have those answers readily to hand, but these guys knew straight away, these are the top 3 reasons people hire us. Then I made the calls, and out of 4 calls, 1 person mentioned one of those reasons, and just, in passing. Each of the 4 people had the same number 1 reason that they bought from my client, or that they used my client rather, they're a service-based business. And none of them were on my client's radar. So what that means is now they understand completely why people are buying. And it means that this is a business that relies on visiting companies in person and leaving them with printed material. These people can put in their brochures, this is what we do for you. They can address that number 1 reason. You can also learn how your customers describe their challenges, their wants, their desires, needs, frustrations, problems, pain points. And you'll learn how they talk about it in their own words. And we'll come to this in a little while, but using people's own words in your marketing helps get cut through and resonates with them really, really well, because you're talking to them in their own language. You can also find out, how do they go from not knowing about you, what steps do they take all the way through to buying? So how do they go from nothing to a customer? You can learn what hesitations and objections they might have to buying, what might stop them signing on the dotted line or handing over their credit card. And you can learn where they hang out and what their influences are. And what all that means, you can get these insights to transform your marketing. So you can understand, like that example that I gave, what sets you apart in your customer's eyes, not what you think makes you different, but what the people who are actually paying you money think sets you apart. You can ensure that your product or service is positioned to truly appeal to your best customers. You can craft compelling messages that resonate deeply and sell. And again, that's about using the language that your customers use and mirroring it back to you. Sorry, too many R's for my tongue. You can make sure you're highly visible where they're hanging out. If they're telling you where they hang out online and offline, you can make sure that you're seen there. You'll actually know, rather than needing to guess, which marketing channels are most likely to effectively reach them. And what I should have put on the slide and haven't is where they're most likely to reach them at a time when they're looking for a solution to their problem. A quick example of that, I had an engineering client start with me. He was finishing a contract and preparing to start an engineering consultancy. This is a consultancy that bids for projects that are 6 or 7 figures. And I said, what have you done so far? He said, I've got a logo and I've started a Facebook page, because this client and his family are all heavy Facebook users. And I said to him, James, do you really think people looking for 6 and 7 figure people to do engineering contracts are looking on Facebook for them? No, they're not. So whilst those people might be on Facebook, they're not really interested in looking at a post from an engineering consultancy, even though they might be in the market for it. A better place to show up would have been LinkedIn, or actually, as we figured out, going to concrete conferences, which is a thing. So understanding your customers means you don't have to guess what might be the best platform for you or marketing channel for you. You actually know where your customers are most likely hanging out. You can also counter hesitations and anxieties that they might have about buying your product or using your service, you can put that in your messaging right up front to ease any concerns. Essentially, if you're armed with great customer insights that have come from talking to customers directly, you can ensure your marketing cuts through the noise and connects with your buyers using the right messages in the right place at the right time. Before we go on to the actual nitty-gritty of interviewing, does anybody have any questions about what we've covered so far?
So far, so good.
Okay, great. Let me take a quick drink. Okay, so some practicalities and nitty-gritties, some interviewing tips. So start off, interview your best customers. That's my view. Other people do it differently, but I like to select your best customers on the basis that, you know, these are people that have bought from you willingly. They might be repeat buyers. They might like all your social media posts, tell all their friends about you, endorse you left, right, and centre. If you can understand those people and their behaviours and motivations and needs and desires, then you can use that in your marketing to attract more people like them. I am in the middle of a project at the moment where I've interviewed two groups of people. One is my clients' best customers, and the other is people who made an inquiry but didn't go on to hire my customer. It's lovely talking to the best customers, and the insights are coming thick and fast. It's been really, really hard to, I think I've sent emails to 30 people, multiple emails to people who have inquired but not booked, and I've had 4 people respond. So it's really hard to get those people, the unhappy people, on the phone. You can learn a lot from unhappy people, but you can also learn a lot from those who are really happy and they're the best customers. So I like to make life easier for my customers, for my clients, and let's interview your best customers. Also, just a word on that, I do phone calls rather than Zooms. That's a personal preference, and I know there are trade-offs with doing that, but I like a phone call because all the person that I'm interviewing has to do is answer the phone and talk to me. Whereas if you're trying to do it on a Zoom or a Google Meet or a Teams meeting, there's a little bit more technology involved. There's more that can go wrong. I also think being on a phone, they don't have to look at my face. They don't have to see me responding. And I feel like people open up more when they're not literally face to face. The trade-off with that is that I don't get to see their faces. So I think I'm getting quite good at listening for people's energy in their voices and can hear when they're frustrated or can hear when they're really pumped or excited about something, but I do miss the body language cues. For me, that's a trade-off that I'm willing to take, but you might want to experiment with what works for you. The next tip is record the conversation. So I put my phone on speaker and either have a second device and put it on voice recording, or sometimes I just set up a Zoom to record and have my phone on speaker anyway. The reason to record is you're never going to be able to take notes fast enough at some stages. You want to capture their words verbatim where you can. There might be things in your first interview that are said that it's not until you've had 3 or 4 more interviews that you might want to revisit, and they may have said something that comes up subsequently that makes you realise that first interview had more insight than you realised. And another really key thing about recording the conversation is if you're not recording and you're busy taking notes, your mind's not fully on what they're saying. You're not giving them your full attention because you're writing at the same time. And that's something that I've learned the hard way, is I can't take really good notes and still pay attention to what they're saying. And if you blank out during a customer interview, it can be a little bit hard to seamlessly come back into the conversation. So record it and re-listen to it or get it transcribed afterwards. There are a lot of AI transcription tools that will struggle with Māori place names and Māori names, but for the most part can cope with a New Zealand accent. The next tip is to ask open-ended questions. You're not going to get much in the way of insight if people are only saying yes or no or one-word answers. So all the tips that I have for you coming up are open-ended questions. What we're trying to do is, like I often feel when I'm doing a client interview, it's like a wind-up toy. I wind them up with the question and then let them go, and people talk and talk and talk. So what you want to do is encourage their storytelling and encourage them to talk. But you also, with your questions, want to watch for your own bias creeping in. So you don't want to ask a question like, was it our really awesome TikTok post that made you decide to buy? Because A, that's a closed question, it's either yes or no, but B, and obviously that's an exaggeration, but by saying it's a super awesome TikTok post or whatever, you're introducing some bias into your question. So try really hard to strip bias from your question. Don't be scared to dig deeper or to seem dumb, because it's usual for the insights that yield, or the questions that yield the best results, to come once you've pushed them a little bit more to explain what they mean. So I've got an embarrassing story about when I first started doing this work, and I was working off a script. When you're first starting, I think it's okay to work off a script, but I'd really encourage you, once you've got a few of these under your belt, to have a little bit of faith in your ability and not be as tied to a script. But my script asked, and it's one of the questions that we've got a little bit later on, but my script asked about what people do online, just to understand their online behaviours. And this was a financial services company, and their people were on YouTube. And so I wrote down, it was when I was still writing too many notes, I wrote down, they're on YouTube. I didn't stop to ask them what they were looking at on YouTube, what type of content. So slightly going off script here, but don't stick to a script so much that you lose insights. And again, don't be afraid to dig deeper and ask questions. If somebody's like seeming really excited about something, you can say, you seem really pumped by that. Why was that so important to you? Or why was that such a great thing that you could suddenly do X, or that, this meant Y for you? Or, that seems to have really frustrated you. What was so frustrating? Or what did it mean for your life? Why was it so frustrating? Even things like if somebody says, I was really busy and this helped me do X, what does really busy look like to you? Because how I define really busy might be quite different from how they define really busy. So don't be scared to probe a little bit further and get those deeper insights. Get comfortable with awkward silences. This is a really tough one for me, because nobody really likes awkward silences, and I tend to, after the silence has got just slightly awkward, to want to jump in and suggest an answer or prompt them in some way. If you can, zip it, get comfortable with asking a question and leaving them all the time in the world to answer. Even if it feels really, really awkward, generally they'll answer, and quite often you'll get a really interesting, insightful answer because they've taken the time to really think about it before they speak. So get comfortable with dead air, essentially. And the last tip, and this is important enough to be in a different font and a different colour and underlined, is you are there to listen, not to talk. So again, this is one of the many rookie errors I made when I started doing customer interviews. Is I wanted to build a rapport, so I would share my own experiences. Somebody might say X had happened, and I'd say, oh yeah, that happened to me. And then I didn't. Like I talked too much. We're there to listen to what they say, not to share things of our own. And this is especially important if you're interviewing your own customers, because they might say something about your product or service and they might have misinterpreted something, or you know your stuff inside out, and it can be really tempting to then go into like an explanation of how they could have fixed it or the reasons why your product can do this extra stuff. Keep it quiet and listen to what they're saying. Okay, so let's move on to the questions. I have got a PDF with all the questions listed, so you don't necessarily need to write them all down, but I'm not going to share the PDF till the end because I want your attention on the questions, not on reading ahead. So the first question, what was going on in your life that led you to, and then whatever it is that you're talking about? And the reason that we're asking this is just to set the scene, get them to paint a picture. It doesn't, like some people even say, can you describe, what the day was like? Was it a sunny day? Who were you with? Do you remember where you were? Were you sitting at your desk? What they're trying to do is, they don't care whether it was a sunny day or whether you're sitting at the desk or, at the kitchen table. What they're trying to do is just get people talking, get them to realize that we're interested in details, just to get some verbal fluency going. So what was going on in your life, or if you're a B2B company, you could say what was going on in your business that led you to whatever it is that you're asking about. Sometimes this next question will have already come out when you've asked that first question, but if it doesn't, you can ask, was there a particular event that made you decide it was time to take some kind of action, whether that's to buy the product, to hire me? So for instance, with that financial services company, one of the things that they do is insurance. Was there a particular event that made you decide it was time to get life insurance? Yes, somebody's buying a house, or they've had another kid, or they've got a new job, or they're moving town. And if you can understand what those triggers are, you can try and make sure that you're marketing to people who have those same triggers. Question 3, can you talk me through how you went about searching for a way to deal with your issue? This helps you understand the customer journey. So are they going to Google? Is that the first thing that they're doing is typing, mortgage brokers into Google? Or are they asking friends, hey, just to continue with the mortgage broking theme, who did you use for your mortgage broker? Or, are they sitting at the lunch table at work? Who do you guys know who does mortgage broking? Like, if you can understand their search process, then again, you can make sure that your marketing content, your website, if you've got outreach going on, you can make sure that all those marketing tactics are covering off all the steps in the searching process. How did so-and-so pop up on your radar? So, if it's a Google search, that's one thing. If it's a recommendation from a friend or a neighbor or a family member, that's another. If it's you're being seen on social media constantly, that tells you which of your marketing activities are getting results. And again, you're going to make sure that you are where they're popping up. If it's Google, you want to make sure your SEO keeps you as high up the Google search rankings as it possibly can. Just a little tip, if they say, oh, my neighbour Nancy told me about you, it can be a nice thing to contact neighbour Nancy and say hi, send her, take her for a coffee, just say thank you in some way. It's a nice acknowledgement, and you never know what other referrals you might get from that person. Question 5, was there anything that niggled at you or worried you that might have made you hesitant to buy? So if you can understand what might hold people back, as I said earlier, deal with it up front, address it up front. Actually, I've got a really good example of a product that I bought last week, and it's going to sound sad, but it's not. But my parents are getting old. My dad was hospitalized 2 weeks ago, and it seemed quite serious at the start. He's home now last night, so that was great. But it made me think, my parents are not going to be here forever. I don't know any of the admin around their house. I don't know what they want for their funeral wishes, things like that. I did know that you can buy books that they can complete or paperwork. So I went on, Googled Death Book New Zealand, found a great book. I'll give a shout out to Last Rites, WRITES. And this question, was there anything that niggled at you or worried you? My main concern is, how do you give your parents a book saying, can you complete this, please, in case you die? And my suggestion to Last Rites was, you could do a blog post about how to approach the conversation with your parents. So that would be addressing that hesitation and that niggle up front. If you can do that, if you can bust through any objections or barriers, then you're much closer to a sale. Question 6, how does what we're talking about most add value in your life? What can you do now that you couldn't do before? This is ultimately what we're selling, right? It's not your product or your service. What you're selling is what your product or service allows the person to do or be after they've used it. You're marketing your results. So this question will tell you exactly what results you have got for people and what it means for their life. Question 7, how would you describe what we do or what our product does to somebody else? Now, it can be really, really hard when you're in business to take off your business owner hat and put on your customer hat. In fact, I'd argue it's almost impossible. So it can be really hard to get out of our own heads, but by getting your customers to tell you what you do or what your product does, means that, again, you're hearing this from their perspective, from your buyer's perspective, and you're hearing it in their own words. And I guarantee, some of the answers to this question will be exactly as you expect, and some of them will blow your socks off because you hadn't thought about your business or your product or service in those terms. The next 2 questions are less about your product and service and more about your customer themselves, because if you can understand them and their habits, then that can help with your decisions about which marketing channels to choose. So one of my go-to questions is, when you're online, what are your go-to activities, apps, or websites? So if somebody's telling you that they jump on their phone in the morning and the first thing they do is check their Facebook, check their email, look at the Herald or stuff, or a news site, then you've got a pretty clear idea of what those people's priorities are. If they say they check their email once a day and spend the rest of their phone time is on Candy Crush or online Scrabble or online chess, again, that gives you another indication of who these people are and what's important to them. And actually, not just this is useful not just for choosing your marketing channels, but also what to talk about. So the next question, what do you do to kill time when you aren't online? I asked this question last year for a client, and pretty much everybody, like probably 8 out of 10 people I interviewed, part of what they do when they're online is go for walks on the beach. So whilst, my client's not going to put a billboard up on the beach, she could, if she was smart, sometimes park her branded vehicle in the beach car park. It was a small geographical area, so that's a bit easier than perhaps some other areas. But also she can talk in her social media content or in her emails about walking on the beach or walking in nature. That was another thing that I heard. So it's not only necessarily about learning where to show up to get the attention of the people that you want to buy, but it's also what's important to them and how you can use that knowledge to talk to them. And then the last question, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask, because back when I was writing copious notes, I could never write these ones down fast enough because you get really great answers to this question. So you ask them, if you wanted a friend to buy such and such, but you only had 30 seconds to do so, what would you say to them to convince them? And the beauty of this question is saying, but you only had 30 seconds. Spoiler alert, nobody ever stops at 30 seconds, which is absolutely fine. But by putting that time restriction on them, it means they don't waffle. They don't talk around the points. They come straight to the point, and what comes out of their mouth is generally their priorities. So you should buy it because X, Y, and Z, you know that X, Y, and Z are really, really important to your customer. If you don't put that 30 seconds, you can hear a 5-minute story that doesn't, you've got to wade through the dross to get to the good stuff, and you don't necessarily know what the priorities are. So by putting that 30-second container there, that helps people keep really focused on answering that question for you. This is a really nice one too. It's a nice one for me to ask, and I'm assuming it'll be good in your own business because you hear lots of nice things. So that's the 10 questions. You've got your interviews done. What's next? So what I would suggest is, depending on your level of comfort with technology and your resourcing, but if you can, there are a lot of AI transcription services, as I mentioned, that you might want to upload your file and get everything in words, or you can just re-listen to your audio recordings or your Zoom recordings to listen with fresh ears. So I'd suggest leaving it a day or two, or even a week, while you do all the interviews, and then have a listen and try and identify what are the common themes that are coming through. What are the patterns? If you're interviewing one person, you could get all the insights in the world from that one person and they're all legit, but they could be an outlier. Chances are slim, but they could be a one-off. But if you're talking to at least 3 to 5, to 8 to 10 people, you will start to see themes emerge. Sometimes you might want to go with your gut. There might be one person that says one thing. None of the other people that you interview say it, but you feel deep inside that that's important. Give it a try. You might decide to do some marketing based on it. You might decide to do some social media posts mentioning it. There's no harm in trying. But yeah, look for patterns and trends. What are the things that you're hearing over and over again? Once you've got your head around that, you can tailor your marketing messaging and your positioning to make sure that it's saying things that are going to resonate with your customers. You can develop customer personas. Again, I have a beef with personas because to me they're fictional personas that don't have, people have made them up. I did it when I first started my business. I had 2 personas that were a complete fabrication and had no basis in reality, but sounded good. But you can use them to develop customer personas that are based on fact rather than fiction or guesswork. As I've mentioned a number of times, because it's so important, you can use it to handle objections up front. You can make choices about your channels or your marketing activities, excuse me, and you can identify where your gaps are. Are you showing up in places that your customers aren't? Are you saying the wrong thing? Or are you saying the right thing, but in the wrong place or at the wrong time? So look at what you've learned and try and get a handle on all those things. And when you've done some interviews, keep at it and interview some more. So I've just got a couple of little warnings for you. I've got a client that I'm working with at the moment, and she's doing the interviews, and then we're working together to do some analysis on them. And we met last Thursday and I recorded our conversation. So these are verbatims from a conversation with a client who's going through this work at the moment. And I'm pulling out some of the things that she said as warnings. So she said on Thursday, I've done 5 or 6 customer interviews and I've come to the awful realization that our stereotypical computer illiterate customer is alive and well, and we had thought we were moving on from that. So that was pretty depressing. This isn't going to happen all the time, but you are going to find out things that you don't want to find out, or you're going to hear things that you don't necessarily want to hear. But the advantage of hearing that is that you know that things are a problem and you can deal with it and put it to bed. She also said, I'm not going to waste marketing energy on any of the people that I spoke to so far, even though they're lovely and they love me and they were really good for my ego. You will get a big ego boost. But something that I'd really like to stress is when you're doing, when you're asking for the interview or when you first start it and you're doing a bit of an intro, stress to the people that you're interviewing that honesty and being really upfront is really important. Don't be scared to ask them not to be scared to hurt your feelings or to say things that are negative, because it all helps you get better and to grow. So whilst it can be great for your ego, just make sure that people know that they can say things that don't necessarily stroke your ego either. But I think you'd probably be quite pleased at the end of interviews when you hear what they have to say. Interviews, they're actually fine once you've started, but there's a mental block about actually making the call. And that mental block is real. There's a mental block about sending the emails in the first place or calling them to say, hey, can I talk to you? But push through. It's well worth the time and effort and the results. And she finished up by saying, so yeah, customer interviews, it was a useful thing. And it's something that I think would be beneficial to do monthly or quarterly. So once you've started, you'll realize that the learnings are worth your time, your energy, and you're pushing outside your comfort zone. So I'm really conscious of time. I've got some really quick examples that I'll zoom through and then a Q&A. So this is the financial services company. In fact, we've already talked about this one. They were paying for Facebook and LinkedIn ads. Talk to the customers. None of them are on Facebook and LinkedIn. They were all on YouTube. So the opportunity is to save money on marketing. They're marketing to people who aren't there on Facebook and LinkedIn. Put your money into marketing where your people are hanging out on YouTube. I did interviews for a skincare brand, and this is where using the words that they're saying to you can help in your marketing. So the messaging used to be all natural, certified organic, hypoallergenic ingredients, and verbatim what one of the customers said to me, pure bliss, no nasties, simple. Another example was her website said formulated to rejuvenate and invigorate aging skin. And that was turned into get ready to be told you look younger than when I saw you last. Both those after columns are exactly what customers said, and you can see how much more compelling they are than the before column. And one last example, I did some work for a budget advisory service, and to be honest, they didn't learn anything new about why people came to them for help, but they did learn what worries and anxieties, they learned what stopped people from coming to them in the first place. And they knew one or two of them, but we got about 8 really solid insights, which means that they can turn those into the script. When people call them for help, they can make sure that they're addressing the issues and the hesitations that people might have and putting it on their website and on their Facebook. And they also found out stories of how they changed their clients' lives, which was so lovely to hear. And again, case studies for social media and their website about these are the results that we can get for you. So that has come to the end of the customer interview presentation. Are there any questions?
There are a couple of questions. Thank you so much. This has been such a great session, and I love the way you walked through it like that. And I love the examples at the end. As a copywriter myself, I used to do a lot of marketing for a wellness organization. And, the keywords that we would use were a lot of the stuff on the left, and then it's really interesting to see how much simpler it was on the right, and just really hits the mark. So, I mean, some of that had to do with the brand tone of voice and the way that we wanted to be, portrayed, but perhaps there could have been some shifts there that would have been more applicable. So that's really interesting. So some questions here. One from Kat that says, do you need to tell them you're recording?
I actually don't know legally whether you do, but I feel like it's a nice upfront thing to do to make them aware. I've never, ever had anyone do any pushback. Once I've had to say, I won't share the recording with my client, so they won't, and anything that you say isn't identifiable as coming from this particular individual. It's all grouped together. But I just feel like it's a courtesy to let people know that you are recording.
I think so too. I mean, when you come onto Zoom, even platforms like this now, as soon as you hit record, it says this meeting's being recorded. You can feel free to leave if you like. And I just think, for people's own privacy, I think it's really, really probably best practice. Yeah. And that disclaimer, most people are so happy with just going ahead anyway, as long as they know they've got that anonymity, and you're not going to splash them all over social media in a certain way, they're quite happy to give that feedback. Another question here, how long do you allow for each interview?
I now that I have got a lot more experience in it, I ask people for between 30 to 45 minutes. But when I started out, was probably, I think, the shortest interview I ever did was 8 minutes, because he was not the world's most chatty guy and he had somewhere to go. That was fine. I still got insights. Like, I'd suggest starting out with 15 minutes, but maybe asking right up front, at the same time as you're asking, hey, is it okay to record? Ask them if they've got a hard stop. Say, hey, we've scheduled 15 or 20 minutes. If you need to go exactly in 20 minutes, we'll make sure it finishes, but, if it rolls on a little bit. And what I do find is, when I tell my clients that the interviews can be 45 minutes, I often hear, my people won't talk for that long. They're busy. They don't want to talk. And I have to, it's all I can do to stop myself saying, are you kidding? Having somebody hang on every single word you say and listen really attentively and be so interested in your point of view. Like, I did a call a month ago to some very lovely people in Canada, and I was at the 38-minute mark and started my winding up. And the lady said, oh, can I just tell you one more story? Like, people like telling the stories. So schedule whatever you feel comfortable with. I'd start with 15 minutes and you'll soon learn whether you need more. But don't discount the fact that people do like to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've definitely experienced that in I actually have when people book in to do sessions like this, my quick chat booking system that I have allows them for 15 minutes, and everybody's like, oh, 15 minutes, like we got to really hustle. And it does put people in a little bit of a hustle, which I do like because I like things to be concise. But I always give a window of 15 minutes after that 15 minutes, because I know that the majority of the time it's going to go over,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just going to go over. They're going to have more questions, or they're going to want to chat a little bit, you got to build that rapport a little bit, and so, yeah, but I think it also comes down to, I don't know if you agree with this, being really prepared when you step into that meeting. If you're going off of questions that you've scripted and stuff, making sure that you are proficient in asking those questions and listening intently and being prepared is, I think, just such an important thing to show people that you're a professional and that you know what you're talking about, yeah, that would be something that if I go to something, they're like, oh yeah, so what do you think about, then I'm gonna, come on, like, hustle, that's just the past New Yorker in me that, like, I like to get to the point and, tell me what's going on. I'm happy to help, but I want to know, that you know what you're talking about, or you have a plan. Because I'm
Actually,
like
and
your boss.
that's possibly a bullet point that I should have put in the tips, is before you start the interview, like, just remind yourself what you're hoping to get out of it. So if your main thing that you want to understand is where your people are hanging out, because you want to choose what social media platform, have that at the forefront. So if nothing else, you get an answer to that question. But yeah, think about what are the essential things that you want to learn, and maybe have them written down to keep you focused.
And if you're like not a communicative person, I know, my partner has to do interviews all the time with patients, and he had to really work at being able to ask those questions and asking the right questions. And he would ask them to me, practice on me, making sure that he could get, the words out in a way that was really direct, and it made sense, and it got the answers that he was looking for, and it's a skill, asking questions. And so making
Yeah.
sure you practice. You can practice on your friends and your family. That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another question here, will the PDF of the 10 questions be emailed to attendees? So do you want to release that document to people via a link that you're putting in the chat, or did you want to send that through to our team and we'll pop it up underneath the recording on the website? We could do both.
Why don't I send it to your team? Sorry, I was so busy that I didn't. I'll try and add it to the chat now.
Okay.
And but yeah, or
well,
you can email me and I'll send it.
Yeah, well, you do that. I'm going to read this lovely bit of feedback from Philippa. It said, thanks you so much, Kathryn. And I'm buzzing with that session. Just made so much sense to me. Looking forward to putting things into action. Absolutely agree that informing people you want to record them is important. I think it's about respecting them and their insights. So glad you got value out of this session, Philippa. And those of you tuning in on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, you can drop your questions into the chat. We're still here for just another moment or so while we get that link across all the channels. And once you drop it into the chat, I'll drop it into the chats across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So a great opportunity this morning to add a layer to your business, because I heard you talk about personas, and we do hear a lot of folks come on and talk about personas. Now, would you recommend, in the beginning, you don't have these insights, you don't have customers, until you kind of hone in on who your customers are, is it okay to kind of, just keep refining those personas over time as you gain those insights? Because otherwise it seems like you would just start with nothing.
Yes, but because sorry, there's no link for me to put the doc in there, so I'll have to send it to you. What I would suggest is, like, go and stalk people like them on social media I do that quite a lot. I have a massive spreadsheet where I steal other people's words. So if they're saying something in a Facebook group or on LinkedIn and I like the language, I put it in my document. You can find out a lot of stuff by stalking your competitors' comments, stalking groups that your people are in. By all means, start with a fictionalized persona in the first place, but as soon as you have a customer or two or know people who are likely to be customers, start making it more factual rather than a figment of your imagination.
Now, when you say stalking other people's customers, what do you mean by that?
Oh, so you could look at somebody else's, like a competitor's social media page or their testimonials. If you go onto their website and look at their testimonials, obviously not stealing it, but you'll learn, if they're good testimonials, you'll see the type of language that they use in the testimonials. You'll see them talk about their problems and issues and their results. So whilst you're not stealing exactly from them, it's informing what your people are likely to think, or what their problems are likely to be.
I like that word, informing. I think we'll we'll stick with that word, informing, instead of stealing. Yeah, we'll use it as information. So no, that's a great tip, and that's a great way to also just compare your website to other people's websites. There's lots of tools you can go and use to actually, have a look at the most popular Google, where they hit on the line and what kind of SEO they're using, what language they're using, how they're getting that traction, where their call to action buttons are on their website. That research, that due diligence is super important, because you are in a bit of a competitive market, but remember that you'll also have your own unique amazingness that you're sharing with folks. Okay. And will the presentation be shared with attendees? So I believe that's what we're talking about here. So if you tuned in, Kathryn's going to send that through to me, and it will go onto the website underneath the recording. So when you get the link to the recording, you can look below, and it used to be called Learning Summaries. And it might still be called a learning summary, and you should be able to just click on that and it'll open up the PDF for you.
So I'll send through a copy of the slides, and I'll also send through a PDF with a list of those questions. But if anybody wants to email me directly, that's fine.
Yeah, great. And it's just all PDF. Just send me a huge PDF and it just goes up like that. So yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much. We've been waiting a long time for this session, haven't we?
Yeah.
We booked this ages ago. So I'm super stoked we got here.
It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Great insights. Thanks everyone for joining us. And yeah, tune in on Thursday. Gosh, what are we doing? I don't even know. Sorry, Kathryn. I'll just have a quick look.
No, that's all right.
Make sure that people tune in. Oh, we're going to be doing how to set up a Google search ads for tradie. Oh no, sorry, that's July. I'm in the wrong month. It's all right. I'll be all right on the night. We're going to do how to start planning your online export success with a step back in coordination with NZTE. So join us for that workshop on Thursday. It should be really valuable. Have a great day, guys. Kaki.